There once existed a gospel named after the most controversial woman in the Bible. Not Mary. Not Mary Magdalene. Eve. The Gospel of Eve. And the early Christian church hunted down every single copy and burned them. Not a single manuscript survived. Think about what you know about Eve. In the book of Genesis, she gets exactly 7 verses before she's blamed for humanity's downfall. She listens to a serpent. She eats forbidden fruit. She tempts Adam. The end. For 2,000 years, she's been the villain. The reason we suffer. The reason we die. But the Gospel of Eve told a completely different story. In this text, Eve wasn't the villain. She was the teacher, the revealer of divine mysteries, the embodiment of the divine feminine. And that's exactly why they destroyed it. How do we know this gospel existed? Because a church father named Epiphanius was so furious about it, he wrote an entire section condemning it in the year 375 AD. He called it heresy. He called the people who read it disgusting. And he made sure it was completely destroyed. He succeeded. Today, we have no complete manuscripts. No ancient copies hidden in desert caves. No forgotten library scrolls. All we have are hostile quotations, fragments quoted by the very men who wanted this text erased from history. But even those fragments are enough to understand why they were terrified. Epiphanius quotes the Gospel of Eve in order to condemn it. Which means, ironically, he's the only reason we know anything about it at all. He preserved the very words he wanted destroyed. So what did this forbidden gospel actually say? This is the story of the Gospel of Eve. What it taught, why it was destroyed, and what we lost when it burned. Here's the first fragment Epiphanius quotes. It's a vision of heaven, and it includes this line. I am you, and you are I, wherever you are, I am there. I am sown in all things, and when you gather me, you gather yourself. This is pantheistic mysticism. The idea that divinity isn't sitting on a throne in heaven, it's scattered throughout all of creation. In you. In me. In everything. And notice who's speaking. Not God, the Father. Not Jesus. The divine feminine. In Gnostic Christianity, this divine feminine principle was called Sophia wisdom. And the Gospel of Eve seems to identify Eve herself with this cosmic force. Eve isn't the woman who caused the fall. She's the divine wisdom present in all creation. Think about what this means. If divinity is already within you, you don't need a priest to access it. You don't need a bishop. You don't need the institutional church at all. You can see why Epiphanius was furious. The second fragment describes a vision of the tree of life. But this isn't the Genesis tree that got humanity expelled from paradise. This tree bears 12 fruits, and Eve herself is standing beside it, teaching. She's not the one who destroyed paradise. She's the one revealing how to return to it. This is a complete inversion of the Genesis story. In Genesis, Eve's curiosity damns humanity. In the Gospel of Eve, her knowledge saves it. She's not the problem. She's the solution. This fits perfectly with Gnostic Christianity. Gnostics believed that salvation came through gnosis, secret knowledge. And they believed the serpent in Eden wasn't a deceiver. It was a liberator. Eve, by eating from the tree, gained knowledge. And that knowledge was the path to freedom. For 2,000 years, Christianity has condemned Eve for seeking knowledge. But the Gospel of Eve celebrated her for exactly the same act. She wasn't disobedient. She was enlightened. Epiphanius also accuses the readers of this gospel of treating sexuality as sacred. Not sinful. Not shameful. Sacred. They apparently believed that the human body, including sexual union, was part of the divine creation, not a curse from the fall. This was heresy. So here's what the Gospel of Eve seems to have taught. Eve as divine wisdom. Knowledge as salvation. The body as sacred. The feminine as holy. And every word of this theology was systematically destroyed. Between the 2nd and 5th centuries, Christian orthodoxy waged a campaign against Gnostic texts. They called them heresy. They banned them. They burned them. And they executed the people who read them. The Gospel of Eve was destroyed in this purge. But the rage directed at the Gospel of Eve seems especially intense. It wasn't just another Gnostic text. It represented a triple threat. It elevated a female figure to divine status. It treated sexuality as sacred. And it gave women religious authority. Epiphanius and other church fathers didn't just condemn this gospel. They physically destroyed it. They tracked down manuscripts. They burned libraries. They interrogated believers until they revealed where copies were hidden. And it worked. Epiphanius claimed the Gospel of Eve was used by a group called the Borborites. He accused them of grotesque rituals, consuming bodily fluids as sacraments, practicing unrestrained sexuality, treating pregnancy as blasphemy. But here's the problem. We only have his word for it. Modern scholars are deeply skeptical of Epiphanius's accusations. Why? Because this was a standard tactic. When you wanted to destroy a religious group, you accused them of sexual deviance. It happened to early Christians. It happened to Jews. And it happened to the readers of the Gospel of Eve. What's probably true? That some early Christian group read the Gospel of Eve. That they had non-orthodox beliefs about the body and sexuality. That they gave women religious authority. What's exaggerated? Probably everything Epiphanius described in graphic detail. The Gospel of Eve is not in the Nag Hammadi library. It's not in any ancient collection. It doesn't survive in Coptic, Greek, or Syriac. It was completely erased. And that erasure was deliberate. For over 16 centuries, the Gospel of Eve has been silent. The voice it gave to the divine feminine is gone. The theology it taught is lost. So what exactly did we lose when this text burned? Imagine if the Gospel of Eve had survived. Imagine if Christianity had developed with a theology that honored the divine feminine, that treated the body as sacred, that celebrated women's religious authority. We'd be living in a completely different world. Instead, Christianity developed a theology that made Eve the villain, that treated women's bodies as sources of temptation, that barred women from religious leadership. And the Gospel of Eve, which taught the opposite, was erased. What if Thomas Aquinas had read the Gospel of Eve? What if Martin Luther had? What if the entire history of Christian theology had to contend with a text that made Eve divine? We'll never know. For 2,000 years, Christianity has shaped Western attitudes toward women, sexuality, and the body. And for 2,000 years, the Gospel of Eve, which might have offered a radically different vision, has been absent. Did its destruction shape history? Yes, absolute. Today, feminist theologians are trying to recover the voices of women in early Christianity. They're piecing together fragments. They're reading between the lines of hostile sources. They're trying to imagine what the Gospel of Eve might have said. But here's the truth. The destruction worked. The Gospel of Eve is gone. We have 2 fragments, a few hostile quotations, and 16 centuries of silence. That silence is the point. So ask yourself this. Why were they so afraid of this text? What truth did the Gospel of Eve contain that was so dangerous it had to be completely destroyed? We'll never know for certain. But the fact that they burned it tells us everything. The Gospel of Eve is lost. But the questions it raised are still with us. What would Christianity look like if the divine feminine had been honored? What would our world look like? Only fragments remain. But even fragments can illuminate the darkness. This is the Gospel of Eve. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. See you next time.